5-year-old Paul Gibson of Myrtle Creek, 21-year-old Ricardo Ruiz II of Portland, and 21-year-old Jeff Hengel of Roseburg. Meanwhile, the B&B fire has now blackened more than 37,000 acres, and authorities say the two fires
out here. All these guys have been with us for 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 years. So.
A Roseburg company and the entire community mourns the loss of 8 firefighters who were returning home yesterday from a blaze in Idaho when they all died in a van crash. We want to show you pictures of each of the men who died along Highway 20 when their van collided head-on with a semi-truck. Ricardo Ruiz was just 19. Jesse James was 22. They both lived in Roseburg. Also from Roseburg, 27-year-old Leland Price and 21-year-old Jeff Hengel. 2 of the victims were from Myrtle Creek, 23-year-old Mark Ransdell and 25-year-old Paul Gibson. 38-year-old David Hammer and 21-year-old Richard Moore were from Portland. All the men worked for First Strike Environmental, a contract firefighting company in Douglas County. Catherine Stevens spent today in Roseburg. She's live in the newsroom with details of how the company and community are coping. Catherine?
Well, David, First Strike is where many local kids after high school or during college find good summer jobs, and the loss of these 8 firefighters is hitting the community hard. Roseburg Mayor Larry Rich is also an assistant principal at the high school. He knew 2 of the young men when they attended Roseburg High.
Well, I know it's a difficult time for First Strike, their employees. I know that they're just devastated by it, and they've been around for a long time, probably 15, 20 years, and this is their first major accident that they've dealt with. So,
Rich says First Strike has been a good local business in the community for 10 to 15 years. Company officials today offered grief counseling to fellow employees and family members of the victims. Meantime, the whole town is feeling the loss.
Yeah, the guys coming home thinking that they were going to get some rest and then having something like this happen. It's really, really sad.
Karen Skeevers feeds First Strike firefighters at her cafe 15 to 20 at a time before each team leaves town for their next assignment. The accident left a somber mood in the cafe today. David?
All right. Thank you, Catherine, for that report. Investigators say the crash happened as the firefighters' van tried to pass another vehicle on a curve before it collided with the truck. Services for the firefighters are still pending. The wildfire burning in Central Oregon continues.
Company officials learned Sunday afternoon a van carrying 8 of their workers crashed in eastern Oregon, killing all 8 on board. Police say their van collided with a tractor trailer and exploded in flames just west of Vale on Highway 20 while returning home from fighting an Idaho wildfire. The van apparently tried to pass a vehicle on a curve and crossed the double line before it collided head-on with a truck. Bob Kruger, president of First Strike in Roseburg, says it was a tight-knit group of firefighters.
Losing 6 of our boys, and this is just huge. We're a small company. We're, like I say, we employ a couple hundred people, so everybody knows everybody in town. And
killed were 19-year-old Ricardo Ruiz of Roseburg, 23-year-old Mark Ransdell of Myrtle Creek, 22-year-old Jesse James of Roseburg, 38-year-old David Hammer of Portland, 27-year-old Leland Price Jr. of Roseburg, 25-year-old Paul Gibson of Myrtle Creek, 21-year-old Richard Moore of Portland, and 21-year-old Jeff Hengel of Roseburg. The company has already started its crisis intervention to counsel fellow workers and families of victims.
Putting some teams together to help with crisis intervention when they arrive back into Douglas County. We're doing kind of some one-on-one counseling with those here at the offices as they have time to do that.
It took more than 7 hours for the highway to reopen once authorities recovered the bodies and highway crews cleaned up the wreckage. Campers can breathe a little easier in eastern Douglas County now. Police have arrested a suspect in the shooting of a Roseburg couple last week near Lamolo Lake. 28-year-old Samuel Lawson, recently from Roseburg and from Lapine, was taken into custody.
16 miles west of Vale, Oregon on Highway 20. Tonight, a community and an industry accustomed to working in dangerous conditions deals with tragedy. Good evening, I'm Wendy Anna King.
And I'm Chris Corcoran. The firefighters were traveling together, returning home from battling fires in Idaho. But one wrong move apparently cost them their lives.
Today, a makeshift memorial marks the crash site. 8 flags, one for each fallen firefighter, along with flowers, and a stone inscribed, "Firefighters, rest in peace." Sunday, twisted, charred metal was all that's left of the van and semi-tractor. 8 firefighters, 6 from Douglas County, were traveling together in the van. Investigators believe the van apparently tried to pass another truck on a curve and cross the double yellow line, colliding head-on with an oncoming semi-truck.
Well, a reconstruction team will look not only at the witness statements and everything that we and you know today, but will also be gathering all the evidence that is available from the vehicles, from the roadways, from the conditions, and then compiling all that, computing it, and then getting the findings from all parts of it.
The victims all worked for First Strike Environment, a Roseburg-based contract firefighting company. They are identified as 19-year-old Ricardo Ruiz of Roseburg, 23-year-old Mark Ransdell of Myrtle Creek, 22-year-old Jesse James of Roseburg, 27-year-old Leland Price, also of Roseburg, 25-year-old Paul Gibson of Myrtle Creek, and 21-year-old Jeff Hengel of Roseburg. The semi's 2 occupants suffered non-life-threatening injuries. It took more than 7 hours for the remote eastern Oregon highway to reopen. The wreckage of the van and semi was almost indistinguishable. Reconstruction experts say they believe the firefighters were killed instantly when the van burst into flames. In June of last year, 5 Oregon-based firefighters died when the van they were riding in overturned in Colorado.
As news spread about the deaths of the 8 firefighters, the community of Roseburg came together to mourn. The News Channel's Cheryl Gatwiza talked to people who knew the men, and she joins us live from our newsroom with the story. Cheryl.
Wendy, it's a sad day in the community of Roseburg as more people are finding out about Sunday's tragedy, and now community members and loved ones are remembering the men who died.
It's just, we train hard, and this devastation is just beyond us.
Employees at First Strike, the company in Roseburg that contracted the firefighters, are having a hard time dealing with the recent news.
So it's like losing your son. These guys were just, everybody knows everybody, so they're just shocked. I mean, they're thinking about them all the time.
4 of the 8 men were from Roseburg. They varied in age from 19 to 27. Jeff Hengel and Ricardo Ruiz are alums at Roseburg High. Hengel graduated in 2001 and Ruiz in 2002.
I just had a feeling that there were going to be students that graduated from the high school and were known in our community, and so when the names came out, then it was definitely a shock.
People who knew Jeff Hengel say he was a happy guy who loved life.
Just that he was a fun guy. He was nice to people. He was loving. He was caring. He would do anything if he needed it done, He was pretty much a good guy. Just super nice and super kind. He'd come up and give you a hug, and he was so friendly. He'd walk around to people, and just a social bug is what he was, and he was just great.
All of the families have been notified Monday morning, and now those who knew the men best say it's time to come together to help get through this tragic time.
It's pretty sad, and I just give hope to the parents and to the family members.
I think the best thing right now is for the families and the grief that they're going through. So this is a time for us to concentrate on the families.
Now, First Strike representatives have brought in a crisis team to help the staff members get through this tragic time, and also chaplains are visiting with families. Live in the newsroom, I'm Cheryl Gatwiza for the News Channel.
First Strike Environmental will be meeting with each of the families tomorrow and Wednesday to discuss memorial service arrangements.
In other news tonight, 2 wildfires known as the B&B complex have scorched nearly 30...
Because of the van that flipped. I'm still in shock over it.
The names are released of 8 Oregon firefighters killed in a van accident over the weekend. 6 of them are from Douglas County. Good evening, everyone. I'm Kimberly Walters. The 8 men were driving on Highway 20 near Vale, Oregon early yesterday morning. They were coming home after 11 days of fighting fires in Idaho. The driver of the van went to pass a truck crossing the double yellow line around a turn on a 2-lane highway. That's when they hit a semi-truck head-on and the van burst into flames. 2 of the firefighters were from the Portland area, the other 6 from Douglas County. People in the Roseburg community are still recovering from the shock of hearing the news.
Well, I gasped, horrified. I have 2 sons who are 19 and 21, and these young men are most likely in the same age group as most likely some of them we know. We're not a very big community. It's going to touch lives that we know.
The two people in the semi-truck survived and were taken to the hospital with burns. Business owners say drivers of the company vans are specifically trained for their position and say the correct driver was behind the wheel at the time of the crash. Sources say the group was well rested before leaving early yesterday morning. One of the firefighters killed was 21-year-old Josh Hengel from Roseburg. Amy Clark spoke with his family to see how they're coping with the tragedy.
The gentle giant with a heart of gold. That's how Jeff Hengel's family describes their 20-year-old son. At 6'7" and weighing 270 pounds, Jeff was the perfect fit as a firefighter. He loved the outdoors and a good challenge.
He loved the camaraderie with his fellow firefighters and the way everybody looked out for everybody, you know, because that was his thing. I mean, he looked out for people.
It's been just one day since Brian Hengel learned of his son's death. Jeff was one of 8 Oregon firefighters killed when the van he was riding in ran head-on into a semi-trailer. Brian and his wife Judy say they're not angry. Instead, they're hopeful that their son will live on in the heart of his community.
Just a bad decision at the wrong moment, and that everybody, you and I and everybody, make you know, a bad decision, and some of us get away with it and some of us don't.
Jeff's two passions in life were cooking and firefighting. He had recently graduated from Portland's Western Culinary School and was getting ready to leave for Antarctica for a job as a chef. Jeff talked to his parents just a few days before the accident. He was excited about getting to work the fire lines and told his mother how much he loved her.
We were best friends. Both my kids are, but he was especially, he needed to talk to me, and we talked almost every day.
Jeff will be remembered for his love of the outdoors, his passion for life, but most of all, his parents say, for having such a big heart.
If the world could be anything like him.
Others who knew Hengel describe him as a teddy bear who would always come up to people to give them hugs.